Emily was a bright little girl, only 8 years old, with a smile that could warm even the coldest day. She lived with her mother in a small, cozy house in a quiet neighborhood. Their home wasn't fancy, but it was full of love, laughter, and the smell of her mother's cooking. Emily loved waking up to the soft sunlight streaming through her bedroom window, the chirping of birds outside, and the sound of her mother humming in the kitchen. Life was simple, but it was beautiful. Every morning, Emily would walk to school with her small backpack bouncing on her shoulders. She loved the feel of the fresh morning air and the sight of the trees swaying gently as if they were greeting her. Along the way, she would often stop to wave at neighbors, at the cats lounging on porches, or pick up colorful leaves that had fallen to the ground. Emily had a curious nature. She noticed little things that others often ignored, like the shape of clouds, the way rain made puddles dance, or the tiny flowers that pushed through cracks in the sidewalk. Her mother often said Emily had a heart too big for her age. She would help her classmates with homework, give away her favorite pencils if someone needed one, and share her snacks without being asked. She didn't see these things as kindness. To her, it was just the natural thing to do. She believed that if someone needed something and she could help, she should do it. Emily wasn't just kind. She was also full of imagination. She loved reading stories, especially those about heroes and people who changed the world with small acts of courage. Sometimes she would sit by her bedroom window, dreaming about adventures, and imagining herself as someone who made a difference. Her mother always encouraged her to believe that even the smallest person could make a big change in the world. But what made Emily truly special was the way she connected with people. She had a habit of looking into someone's eyes when they spoke, really listening, as if their words were the most important thing in the world at that moment. She could sense when someone was sad, even if they didn't say it out loud. And when she noticed, she would try to brighten their day with a joke, a drawing, or simply a smile. Life in Emily's neighborhood was peaceful, but it wasn't perfect. She had seen people struggling too, like the old man who collected cans, the woman who sometimes slept on a park bench, and the kids who wore the same clothes to school every day. Emily didn't fully understand why life was harder for some people, but she knew one thing: it didn't seem fair. She often asked her mother why people didn't have homes or enough food. Her mother would gently explain that sometimes life gave people challenges, and not everyone had the same opportunities. Emily would listen quietly, her young mind trying to make sense of it all. Her mother worked hard to provide for them. She had 2 jobs, one at a small cafe during the day and another cleaning offices in the evening. Even though she was always busy, she never forgot to spend time with Emily, helping her with homework, telling her bedtime stories, and reminding her to be grateful for what they had. Emily admired her mother's strength and often dreamed about helping her one day, maybe buying her a big house where she could rest instead of working so much. Emily's favorite place to go after school was the small park near their home. It wasn't anything grand, just a few benches, a slide, some swings, and an old oak tree that spread its branches wide like an umbrella. But to Emily, it felt magical. She would play there with her friends, or sometimes just sit on the swing alone, watching the world go by. From her swing, she noticed everyone, children laughing, parents chatting, joggers passing by, and sometimes people who sat quietly, looking tired or sad. She wondered about their stories, where they came from, and what made them happy. One day, as she sat on the swing and watched the golden leaves fall in the autumn breeze, she thought to herself, if I could, I'd make sure everyone had something to eat and a warm place to sleep. She didn't know that this little wish, coming from the heart of an innocent child, was about to set something extraordinary in motion. Emily didn't think of herself as special, but in her small world, she was the kind of person who noticed when someone else was invisible. She saw things not just with her eyes, but with her heart. And in the days ahead, that heart would lead her to make a simple choice so small that she wouldn't realize its power until much later. At that moment, Emily was just a little girl with a big heart, unaware that life was about to put her in the middle of a story that would change not only her own life, but also the life of someone she had never met before. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind that painted the world in shades of gold and amber. Emily was walking home from school, her small shoes crunching against the fallen leaves that covered the sidewalk. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke from nearby chimneys, and the wind carried the distant sound of children's laughter from the playground. She clutched her lunchbox in her hands, swinging it back and forth as she hummed a little tune she had made up in her head. As she turned the corner towards the park, she noticed something that made her steps slow down. On a worn-out wooden bench, near the edge of the path, sat an elderly man. His clothes were faded and patched, his shoes scuffed and dusty. His face was thin, with deep lines that told the story of a hard life. His hands rested on his lap, rough and weathered, as though they had once worked hard but now had little to do. His eyes, though tired, had a kind softness to them, as if they still carried a spark of hope despite everything. Emily stopped a few steps away, watching him quietly. People passed by without glancing in his direction. Some were talking on their phones, others pushing strollers or walking dogs. But Emily noticed something that made her heart ache. The man looked hungry. His gaze lingered on a family that had just passed, the little boy holding a sandwich in his hand. Emily could almost see the longing in the man's eyes, even though he didn't say a word. She thought about the sandwich inside her lunchbox. It was her favorite peanut butter and strawberry jam made by her mother that morning. She had been saving it for later, but now, looking at the man, she wasn't hungry anymore. She was thinking about him. She remembered how her mother always told her, "If you have more than you need, you can share." Taking a small breath, Emily walked up to the bench. The man looked up at her, surprised. "Hello," she said softly, holding out her lunchbox. "Would you like my sandwich? It's really good." For a moment, he didn't move. Then his eyes filled with moisture and his lips curved into the faintest smile. "Are you sure, little one?" he asked, his voice raspy. Emily nodded. "Yes. My mom makes the best sandwiches. You can have it." She placed the sandwich in his hands, and they trembled slightly as he held it. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You're a little angel." Emily smiled and stepped back, watching as he carefully unwrapped the sandwich and took a small bite as though savoring every flavor. She didn't wait for him to finish. She just felt happy knowing he wasn't hungry anymore, at least for that moment as she turned to leave. The wind rustled through the trees, scattering a few leaves at her feet. She glanced back one last time and saw the man looking at her with gratitude in his eyes. It was a look Emily would remember for a very long time, though she didn't know yet just how important that moment would become. That evening, she told her mother about the man. Her mother listened quietly, her expression a mixture of pride and worry. "It was kind of you to share, Emily," she said gently. "But remember, the world can be a complicated place. Always be careful." Emily nodded, not fully understanding her mother's concern. She just knew she had done the right thing. What she didn't know was that this small act, one sandwich, one moment, had set off a chain of events that neither she nor her mother could have imagined. The sun was setting by the time Emily got home that day. The orange glow spilled through the kitchen window, casting long shadows on the floor as her mother stirred a pot of soup on the stove. Emily placed her lunchbox on the counter and washed her hands, but her mind was still at the park. She could still see the man's tired eyes, the way his hands trembled when she gave him the sandwich, and how his voice had cracked when he called her a little angel. That night, as she lay in bed under her soft quilt, Emily thought about him again. Was he still sitting on that bench? Did he have somewhere warm to sleep? She imagined him walking to a cozy home, but deep down she feared that he might be spending the night outside in the cold. She wanted to do more, but she didn't know how. Her small hands could only carry so much. The next morning at school, her mind wandered during class. While other children chatted about cartoons and homework, Emily was sketching a picture of a man sitting under a tree with a sandwich in his hands. Her teacher noticed but didn't say anything. Emily was always a dreamer. After school, she decided to pass by the park again. She slowed her steps as she approached the bench, but it was empty. For a moment, she felt a strange disappointment. She had hoped to see him again, maybe talk to him, maybe bring him another snack from her bag. She glanced around, wondering. If he was somewhere nearby, a sudden thought crossed her mind. What if something bad had happened to him? She shook her head quickly, trying to chase it away. Maybe he found somewhere better to be, she whispered to herself, holding on to the hope that he was safe. That evening, she told her mother that the man was gone. Her mother smiled gently and said, maybe he got the help he needed. Sometimes people just need one kind gesture to find their way. Emily liked the sound of that. She imagined that her sandwich had been like a key, unlocking a door to a better life for him. But as she sat on her bed that night, staring at the soft glow of her nightlight, she felt a lingering sense of mystery. She didn't know it yet, but that missing man's absence was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Somewhere in the city, that same man was holding on to the memory of a little girl's kindness. And that memory was about to lead him to a truth he had been searching for. A truth that would bring the police to Emily's front door sooner than she could ever imagine. Asterisk, the wind had turned colder overnight. And by morning, a thin layer of frost glistened on the grass outside Emily's window. She could see her breath fog up the glass as she peered outside, her thoughts drifting once again to the old man from the park. It had been 2 days since she last saw him, and though she didn't know why, she missed him. She had only spoken to him once, but there was something about him that had left a mark in her young heart. Maybe it was the sadness in his eyes. Or maybe it was the way he looked at her, as if she was the first person in a long time who truly saw him. Emily's school day went by in a blur. She listened to lessons, played at recess, and laughed with her friends, but her mind kept wandering back to that quiet figure on the bench. She even found herself glancing toward the park on her walk home, half hoping, half expecting to see him again. But the bench was empty, the trees stood bare, and the only movement came from a few dry leaves tumbling in the wind. That evening, Emily's mother was busy folding laundry in the living room while the radio played softly in the background. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing. She sketched a little girl with a sandwich in her hands, offering it to a man with kind, tired eyes. She didn't notice her mother watching her from the couch, a faint smile on her face, still thinking about the man from the park. Her mother asked. Emily nodded without looking up. I wonder where he is now. I hope he's warm. It's cold outside. Her mother sighed softly. You have such a big heart, Emily. But sometimes life takes people down roads we can't follow. All we can do is hope they're okay. Emily thought about this for a moment, then put her drawing aside and went to help her mother with the laundry. Still, the old man's face stayed in her mind, as if it was stitched into the fabric of her thoughts. Later that night, Emily woke up to the sound of distant sirens. She pulled her blanket up to her chin, listening as they faded into the distance. The sound didn't scare her, but it made her feel unsettled. She wondered if they were rushing to help someone in trouble. For some reason, her mind went to the man again. Was he all right? Did he need help? In another part of the city, under the flicker of a street lamp, the old man was sitting on a step outside a small shelter, speaking to someone in uniform. His voice was quiet but steady, his story halting at times as he recounted years of loss, wandering, and searching. Somewhere in the middle of his tale, he mentioned a little girl with a sandwich, and that detail, small and seemingly insignificant, caught the listener's attention. The next morning, Emily's life carried on as usual. She ate breakfast, tied her shoelaces, and waved goodbye to her mother as she left for school. But what she didn't know was that her small act of kindness had set things in motion. Somewhere, people were talking about her. Somewhere, questions were being asked. And somewhere, plans were being made that would soon bring strangers to her doorstep. She had no idea that the next knock on her door wouldn't be from a neighbor, a friend, or a delivery person. It would come from people in uniform, and it would change everything she thought she knew about that quiet afternoon in the park. The morning started like any other, but there was a strange stillness in the air, as if the day was holding its breath. Emily sat at the kitchen table, munching on a slice of toast, while her mother read a letter by the window. Sunlight streamed through the curtains in thin golden lines, dancing across the table, but it didn't feel warm. It felt heavy. After breakfast, Emily helped her mother wash the dishes. The sound of running water and clinking plates filled the room. Outside, the street was quiet, except for the occasional car passing by. Emily didn't notice the black and white vehicles slowly turning the corner at the end of their road. A few minutes later, a knock echoed through the house. It wasn't a light, casual knock. It was firm, deliberate. Emily froze mid-step, her small hands still damp from washing. Her mother looked up from the sink, a crease forming between her brows. "Stay here," her mother said softly, drying her hands quickly. She walked to the front door, but before she could even peek through the window, another knock came louder this time. Emily's curiosity got the better of her. She tiptoed closer, peeking from behind her mother's leg as the door opened. Standing there were two police officers, one tall with a serious expression, the other slightly older, with kind eyes that scanned the room before resting on Emily. "Good morning, ma'am," the tall officer said politely. "We're sorry to bother you, but we'd like to ask a few questions. About your daughter." Emily's mother stiffened. "My daughter? What's this about?" The older officer crouched slightly, bringing himself to Emily's eye level. His voice was gentle, almost fatherly. "Sweetheart, were you at the park 2 days ago? Did you talk to an older man? Maybe give him something to eat." Emily blinked, her mind flashing back to the sandwich, the bench, the man's trembling hands. "Yes," she said softly. "I gave him my sandwich." "Why?" The two officers exchanged a look, not of alarm, but of quiet significance, as if a piece of a puzzle had just fallen into place. "Could we come inside?" the tall officer asked. "There's something important we'd like to share with you." Her mother hesitated for a moment before stepping aside. The officers entered, their radios crackling faintly. Emily's heart was thudding in her chest. She wasn't scared, but she could feel that something big was about to be revealed. As they sat in the living room, the older officer began to speak, his tone calm but serious. "The man you helped that day, he's not just any man. He's someone people have been looking for a very long time." Emily's eyes widened. She couldn't imagine why anyone would be looking for a lonely man on a park bench. But the way the officer spoke made her realize that her simple act of kindness had somehow reached far beyond that quiet afternoon. And in the next few minutes, she would hear a story that would change everything she thought she knew about strangers. Fate and the power of one small act. The living room felt different now, heavier somehow, as if the walls themselves were listening. Emily sat on the edge of the couch, her legs swinging nervously, while her mother leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The officers exchanged a quick glance before the older one began to speak. "The man you saw. His name is Thomas Reynolds," he said slowly, as though the name itself carried weight. "For the past 6 years, he's been missing. His family had no idea where he was or if he was even alive." Emily tilted her head slightly, trying to understand. Missing. She thought missing people were only in the news or on posters at the grocery store. She never imagined one could be sitting quietly in her neighborhood park. The officer continued, Thomas is a retired Army veteran. He served his country for many years, but after losing his wife, he fell into a deep depression. One thing led to another, and he ended up on the streets. His daughter tried to find him, but every lead went cold. They thought they had lost him forever. Emily's mother's eyes softened, but her hands stayed tense. So, how does my daughter fit into all this? The tall officer leaned forward. When your daughter gave him that sandwich, something happened. He told us it was the first time in years someone looked at him with kindness, without pity, without judgment. That moment gave him the courage to walk into a local shelter the very next day. While there, he shared his story with a volunteer, who recognized his name from a missing persons bulletin. Emily's mouth dropped open slightly. "So? I helped find him?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The older officer smiled gently. "You did more than that, sweetheart. You gave him hope. You reminded him he still mattered." For a moment, the room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Emily felt something warm spread through her chest, a mixture of pride and disbelief. She had just been trying to help someone who looked hungry. She didn't think it could change a whole life. Her mother looked at her, eyes shimmering with emotion. "Emily, do you realize what you've done? You gave a man back to his family." The officer's voice softened even more. "Thomas's daughter is on her way here. She wants to meet the little girl who brought her father back to her." Emily's heart began to race. She imagined a woman walking through their door, tears in her eyes, hugging her so tightly she could hardly breathe. She wondered what she would say. What could you say to someone whose life you had changed without even knowing it? The knock that came a short while later was softer than the police's earlier knock, but somehow it felt bigger. Emily's mother stood, smoothing her hands over her skirt, and opened the door. There, on the front step, stood a woman in her early 30s. Her eyes red from crying, but her smile so wide it seemed to light up the street. Beside her was Thomas. He was wearing a clean jacket now, and though his face still showed the lines of hardship, his eyes were brighter, warmer. Emily didn't move at first. It felt like a dream. But when Thomas stepped forward and knelt to her height, she saw the same gentle expression he had worn on the bench. Only now it was mixed with gratitude so deep it almost hurt to look at. "Hello again, little angel," he said softly. "You don't know what you've done for me." Asterisk for a moment. The world outside the little house seemed to disappear. The street noises faded, the wind stilled, and it was just Emily, Thomas, and the woman standing in the doorway. The woman stepped forward first. Her eyes were brimming with tears, but her smile trembled with joy. She looked at Emily as if she were seeing a miracle in the shape of a child. "You must be Emily," she said softly, her voice already breaking. "My name is Sarah. I'm Thomas's daughter." Emily nodded shyly, clutching the hem of her sweater. Sarah crouched down so they were eye level, and for a moment she just looked at Emily, her chest rising and falling as if she were holding back a flood of emotions. Then, without hesitation, she wrapped her arms around her. The hug was warm and tight, the kind that says more than words ever could. Emily felt Sarah's shoulders shake, heard the muffled sob that escaped her. "Thank you," Sarah whispered into Emily's hair. "Thank you for giving me my dad back." Emily didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to being thanked for something she thought was so small. I just gave him my sandwich," she said quietly. Sarah pulled back, just enough to look her in the eyes. "You gave him more than that. You gave him hope when he had none." Thomas stepped forward then. His jacket was new, but his weathered hands and lined face told a lifetime of stories. He lowered himself to his knees with some difficulty. But when he looked at Emily, his smile was gentle and steady. "I was ready to disappear. he admitted, his voice deep and husky. I didn't think anyone cared anymore. But then this. Little girl, she looked at me like I was still a person, like I still mattered. His eyes glistened. And in that moment, I realized, maybe I still had something left to live for. Emily's mother was standing nearby, her own eyes wet. She stepped forward and placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. She has a way of seeing people, she said softly, even the ones everyone else overlooks. For a long while, they all just stood there in the doorway. No rush, no awkwardness. Just the quiet understanding that something extraordinary had happened. The air felt charged, almost sacred. Sarah eventually took her father's arm and turned to Emily. We'd like to take you somewhere, she said. There's someone else who wants to thank you. Emily tilted her head. Who? Sarah smiled through her tears. Your kindness didn't just bring my dad back to me. It brought him back to his whole family. In that moment, Emily realized this was bigger than she had ever imagined. She hadn't just given a sandwich to a hungry man, she had opened a door to a reunion that might never have happened without her. And as she stepped outside into the crisp air, walking beside Thomas and Sarah, she felt lighter than she had in days, as if the whole world had just become a little warmer. Asterisk. The next few hours felt like something out of a dream for Emily. Sarah had taken her and her mother to a small cafe near the park, a cozy place, with warm lighting, the smell of fresh coffee, and soft music playing in the background. Thomas sat across from Emily, looking healthier already, his posture straighter than the last time she saw him. Every so often, he'd glance at her with that same quiet gratitude, as if still trying to believe she was real. They talked for a long time. Sarah told stories about her father before life became difficult, about how he used to make her laugh until her stomach hurt, how he'd build her little forts out of blankets when she was a child, and how he taught her to ride a bike. Thomas listened, smiling faintly, but there was sadness in his eyes too. He had missed so much. I can't change the years I lost, he said finally, his voice low but steady. But because of you, Emily, I have the chance to make new ones, and I won't waste them. Emily didn't quite know how to respond, so she just smiled and said, I'm glad you're going home. Later, as the sun began to set, they walked back toward Emily's house. The streets glowed gold in the fading light, and the air was crisp but gentle. At the doorstep, Sarah hugged Emily once more. Never think that small things don't matter, she said. Sometimes the smallest acts have the biggest ripples. Thomas bent down and pressed something into Emily's hand, a small silver coin on a chain. It's a lucky charm, he explained. I've had it since I was a boy. I want you to have it, to remind you of the day you changed a life. Emily held the charm tightly, feeling its cool weight in her palm. It wasn't just a piece of metal, it was a promise, a story, a reminder that kindness had power. That night, as she lay in bed, Emily replayed the events of the past few days in her mind. She realized she hadn't set out to change anything. She'd just seen someone who needed help, and she had helped. But that small moment had woven itself into the lives of others in ways she could never have predicted. Somewhere in the city, Thomas was home with his family again. Somewhere, Sarah was making dinner while her father told her about the little girl who had seen him when no one else had. And here, in her small bedroom, Emily drifted to sleep with the lucky charm still in her hand, knowing that the world felt a little bit bigger and a little bit kinder than it had before. From that day on, whenever she passed the park, she would glance at the bench where she'd first met Thomas. It no longer looked empty. In her mind, she could still see the moment she placed the sandwich in his hands. The moment that proved one small act of kindness could change the course of someone's life forever. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real magic in the world. Weeks had passed since that unforgettable day, Yet the events still lived fresh in Emily's mind. Life in her little neighborhood had returned to its quiet rhythm. The same familiar streets, the same morning walks to school, but Emily saw the world differently now. It wasn't just a collection of houses, parks, and people. It was a place full of stories, each one waiting to be discovered. One chilly Saturday morning, she was walking through the park with her mother when she noticed something new. The old bench where she had first met Thomas had been freshly painted, a deep, rich brown. On the backrest, a small brass plaque gleamed in the sunlight. Emily stepped closer to read the engraved words, "In honor of the kindness of strangers, sometimes one act changes everything." Her heart skipped a beat. She traced the letters with her fingers, realizing that someone, maybe Thomas, maybe Sarah, maybe both, had wanted this spot to be a reminder for everyone who passed by. That afternoon, Emily and her mother went to the shelter where Thomas had first told his story. They brought sandwiches, juice boxes, and small bags of snacks. Emily shyly handed them out, and as she did, she noticed the way people's faces softened when they received something without being asked for anything in return. She realized that the feeling in her chest, that warm, glowing sense of connection, was the same one she had felt the day she met Thomas. A few weeks later, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Thomas. His handwriting was uneven but strong, and every word felt carefully chosen. "Dear Emily, I'm writing this from my daughter's kitchen table. She's making tea, and I can hear her humming, something I haven't heard in years. You gave that sound back to me. I wanted you to know I've started volunteering at the shelter. I tell people my story, but I always start with yours. I tell them about a little girl who gave away her lunch and changed my life. I hope you keep being you, because the world needs more Emilys. With gratitude, Thomas. Emily read the letter 3 times before folding it neatly and placing it in her keepsake box, right next to the silver coin necklace. From then on, whenever Emily walked past the park, she didn't just see the bench. She saw the beginning of something bigger, a reminder that kindness could echo far beyond the moment it was given. She began to believe that maybe she could do more, help more, see more people who felt invisible and somewhere far beyond what she could imagine. Her small act of kindness was still rippling outward, touching lives she might never meet, in places she might never go, in ways she might never know. It all began with a sandwich. But it never truly ended. Years passed, as they always do, quietly at first, and then, all at once. The little girl with the lunchbox and curious eyes grew into a young woman. Emily was no longer the small child swinging her legs on the park bench. She was now a college graduate, her hair a little longer, her voice a little steadier, and her heart still just as open as it had been on that autumn day years ago. Life had taken her far from her small neighborhood. She lived in the city now, studying social work, determined to help people who had been forgotten by the world. Whenever she was asked why she chose that path, she would think of Thomas, of the bench, the sandwich, and the moment she realized one act of kindness could change everything. One rainy afternoon, Emily was walking home from work when she passed by a small cafe. The warm glow inside pulled her in. She ordered a tea and took a seat by the window. The rain streaked the glass in silver threads, and people hurried past with umbrellas. That's when she noticed an older man sitting alone in the corner, wearing a worn coat and staring down at an untouched cup of coffee. For a moment, she was 8 years old again, standing in front of Thomas on that park bench. The same feeling filled her chest, the quiet recognition that here was someone who might need to be seen. She stood, crossed the room, and smiled. "Would you like something to eat?" she asked gently. The man looked up, surprised, his eyes softening. Yes, thank you." She ordered him a sandwich and sat with him as he ate, listening to his story. And as he spoke, she felt that same warm ripple, the one she had felt all those years ago, spreading through her again. That night, she went back to her apartment and pulled out a small box from the top of her closet. Inside was the silver coin necklace Thomas had given her, the one she had kept through every move, every chapter of her life. She held it in her palm, feeling its familiar weight. She realized then that kindness wasn't a single event or a one-time gesture. It was a thread she had been carrying through her life, weaving it into every choice she made, every person she helped, every story she became a part of. Years later, Emily would become the director of a community outreach program that helped thousands of people find shelter, food, and hope. On the wall of her office, framed in simple wood, hung a photo of a park bench with a small brass plaque, in honor of the kindness of strangers, sometimes. One act changes everything. And every time she looked at it, she smiled, remembering that it all began with a peanut butter and strawberry jam sandwich on a crisp autumn afternoon, and a little girl who decided to share it. It had been more than 20 years since the day Emily first met Thomas on that park bench, but the memory remained crystal clear, like a photograph in her mind that never faded. By now, Emily was no longer just a young woman chasing her dreams. She was a mother. Her daughter, Lily, had the same curious eyes Emily once had. The kind that noticed little things other people missed, the lonely man feeding pigeons by himself, the stray cat huddled under a car during the rain, the neighbor who waved but never seemed to smile. Emily often saw so much of her younger self in Lily, and it made her heart swell with both pride and nostalgia. One bright spring afternoon, Emily decided to take Lily to the old park in her hometown. It had been years since she last walked those familiar paths, but as they stepped onto the soft grass and the scent of fresh blooms filled the air, Emily felt as if time had folded back on itself. The park had changed in some ways, new swings, freshly painted railings, but the bench was still there. The brass plaque on the back still shone in the sunlight. In honor of the kindness of strangers, sometimes one act changes everything. Lily traced the letters with her small fingers, just as Emily had done years ago. "Mom," she asked, "what does this mean?" Emily smiled, sitting beside her. "It means that even the smallest act of kindness can change a person's life. Sometimes you might not even know how big the difference is." Lily tilted her head, thinking, "Like, if I gave someone my snack at school?" Emily laughed softly. "Exactly. You never know what that snack might mean to them." As they sat together, an older couple approached the bench. Emily looked up, and her breath caught. It was Sarah Thomas's daughter, her hair now touched with silver. She recognized Emily instantly, and her face lit up. "Emily," she exclaimed, stepping forward to embrace her. Behind her was Thomas, now in his late 80s, moving a little slower but still wearing that warm, grateful smile. They sat and talked for over an hour, sharing stories of the years that had passed. Thomas told Lily how her mother had once given him a sandwich and how that single moment had led him back to his family and a new life. Lily listened with wide eyes, as if hearing the plot of the most magical story she'd ever known. Before they left, Thomas took Lily's hand and pressed something into it, a small folded piece of paper. Inside was a note, written in shaky handwriting. "Dear Lily, kindness is like planting seeds. Your mother planted one for me a long time ago, and it grew into something beautiful. I hope you plant many seeds in your life." Lily folded the paper carefully, tucking it into her pocket as if it were treasure, as Emily watched her daughter walk hand in hand with Thomas toward the park gate. She realized that the story wasn't ending, it was being passed down like a gift from one heart to another. And perhaps, many years from now, someone else would sit on that bench, read the plaque, and decide to do something small, not knowing that it might just change everything. Asterisk, asterisk, many more years passed, as they always do. The seasons turned, children grew in too. Adults and life carried everyone forward. Lily was no longer the small, curious girl tracing the letters on a park bench plaque. She was now a young woman, living in a bustling city with her own busy schedule and responsibilities. Yet somewhere deep inside, she still carried the memory of that day with Thomas and the story her mother had told her countless times about. The sandwich, the park bench, and how one act of kindness had changed everything. One autumn afternoon, Lily found herself walking home from work through a quieter part of the city. The air smelled faintly of rain, and the sky was painted in muted shades of gold and gray. As she passed a small plaza, she noticed an elderly woman sitting alone on a stone ledge. Her coat was thin, and her hands were wrapped around a paper cup that looked long since empty. People streamed past without so much as a glance. Something in Lily stopped her mid-step. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. She had seen this before, not in this exact place, not with this exact person, but in a story. Her mother's story. She walked over and knelt so she could meet the woman's eyes. "Hi," Lily said softly. "You look like you could use something." Warm to eat, the woman's lips trembled into a faint smile. "Oh dear, you don't have to." "I want to," Lily interrupted gently. Minutes later, she returned with a hot sandwich and tea from a cafe nearby. She sat with the woman as she ate, listening to her speak about the years gone by, about how life had once been different, and about how quickly it could all change. Lily didn't try to fix everything in that moment. She just listened. Really? Listened the way her mother once told her Emily had listened to Thomas. Before they parted, the woman looked at her with eyes that seemed to hold a spark of something long missing. "You've reminded me that people still care," she said. "That means more than you know." Lily walked away with a strange mix of heaviness and lightness in her chest. She realized she had just lived her own version of her mother's story, not because she had planned it, but because it had become a part of who she was. That weekend, Lily returned to her hometown to visit Emily. They sat together in the old park on the same bench that had started it all. The plaque was still there, the words still gleaming in the sunlight. In honor of the kindness of strangers, sometimes one act changes everything. Lily told her mother about the woman in the city, about the sandwich, and about the way. The woman's eyes had changed after being shown kindness. Emily listened quietly, her smile soft and knowing. "You've planted your first seed," Emily said, "and you'll plant many more." They sat there for a long time, watching the leaves fall gently around them. Neither spoke much after that, because they both understood the story wasn't ending, and it never would. It would continue in ways they could never predict, touching lives they might never see. It had started decades ago with a little girl, a sandwich, and a man on a park bench. And now it was part of something far bigger, a chain of kindness stretching across years, places, and hearts, without ever losing its warmth. Somewhere, someone else was about to feel it next.